Hey guys, I wanted to hop on here and tell you about my trip. I am still in Kalispell, Montana, and I want to talk about my journey coming here, the lessons I learned, and how, I'm grateful for the experience that happened to me. So, I was supposed to come to community camp. I was leaving New York from LaGuardia to Kalispell, Montana, and I was supposed to leave from 6 a.m. my time, Eastern time, and get here maybe like 1:30 Mountain time, right? Kalispell, which is 2 hours behind New York time. So we left our house. It was me traveling with my kids and my husband. So we left like around a little after 2 a.m. just because we had an early flight and also with the kids, and then I had to go park my car and all that stuff. So we did that. We left. I went to the parking garage to drop off my car. After I dropped it off, just as we were about to get on the shuttle, I get the message that our flight was canceled by Delta. Totally canceled, and I couldn't rebook. There was no alternatives, nothing. Mind you, community camp is supposed to start Wednesday, right? So I wanted to cry at that point, but my husband was like, let's just get to the airport and see what happens since we're here already, right? So we got on the shuttle, we went to the airport, and I got online for the service desk, and I just asked the woman, like, our flight was canceled. Do we have any options, anything like that? So she was like, there's nothing. The flight is full. The best I can do is put you on standby. And I was like, we will take that, just because I was kind of determined at that point, and I just didn't want to just turn around and go home. So we took the standby tickets, and I asked her, because we had one bag to check. So I told her, and I was like, if we check our bag and we're not able to fly, like, what's going to happen to our bag? And she was just she told us, well, either way, the bag is going to Kalispell. So if after 5 days you don't make it there, it's going to get returned back here. So I'm like, okay. So we went and we sat. There was a 7:55 or 6:55 flight. Yeah, no, it was 7:55 because I was supposed to leave at 6. So there was a 7:55 flight to Minnesota, and then from Minnesota to Kalispell, because Kalispell, we cannot get a direct flight to Kalispell from New York. So you always either go to Salt Lake City or you go to Minnesota. One time I went to Dallas or Chicago. So one of those hubs, you have to stop somewhere to just connect. We can't get direct flights from New York to Kalispell. So I was like, fine. So the next flight out for Kalispell was supposed to leave at 7:55. It was delayed, and it was boarding at like 9 o'clock in the morning. So we were just sitting there on standby and just waiting and waiting and waiting. We couldn't get on that flight. It was totally full. I mean, like, booked, packed. There was like maybe like 5, or was it like 11? Because she counted the tickets after. There was like about 11 people on standby. So none of us made it. Like, nobody on the standby list made that flight. The 7:55 one that left at 9 o'clock. So fine. So one of the kind ladies behind the counter, she was so sweet. She was literally trying everything to get me on a flight out of there. So she's like, what if can you go to JFK and get on a flight there? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I can do that. So was she able to get me on? No, she wasn't, because the system would not let her book us. So she kept trying, and I'm like, at this point, I'm close to Newark. I'm close to Philly. I wouldn't mind making that drive just if I can get tickets. So she tried, and after 30 minutes, she literally sat there and kept trying everything. The system would not let her book us at all, anywhere. So the person next to her was like, you have 5 tickets, which might be like an issue, because even on standby, I don't think all 5 of you will be able to get on the flight. So I'm like, oh my God, no. Like, I have 3 little children, and it was my husband, so we would have to split, and I didn't want that. But I was like, at that point, we just needed an option. So she's like, the best bet is we're going to put you all on standby again. There's a flight that's supposed to leave like at 11 something in the morning. So we're going to put you on standby, and there's a chance that you can get on, some of you can get on that flight. Most likely you would have to split up. So I'm like, if that's what we have to do now, let's do that. And in my head, I was thinking, if we don't get on this flight, then I know that maybe we should just go back home. So we went and we sat down and we waited. Of course, that flight was delayed. Instead of leaving at 11 something, it left almost at 1 o'clock. But during that time, I was on the phone with like ticket agents, and I was trying to get like any flights out, anything out, and everything was either not available, super expensive. Somebody was like, do you want to go to Canada? Do you want to do this? It was just like, I was emotional about the whole thing. Excuse me. I was like super emotional because I was like, I didn't know what to do. I really wanted to come to camp. It's like an opportunity of a lifetime. Out of like 13,000 people, you get chosen to go to camp. So it was special to me. So I was like, oh my God, nothing. After being on hold for 2.5 hours and being passed around, it was just like one person. I would get passed around to one person on the phone, and I would explain the situation. And they were like, oh, we were going to transfer you to this department. And when you get transferred, instead of like them explaining to them between themselves like what was happening, like I ended up having to do the explaining over and over and over again. And I was like, at that point, after 2.5 hours, I was just tired. So I just told the person, like, please don't transfer me anymore. Like, I will call back shortly, but let's see, because during that time, the second standby was boarding. So I just wanted to see if we were going to get on that flight or not. So it started boarding, and I sat back down next to my family, and the guy came over and was like, I think I can get 4 tickets. I'm not sure if I can get 5, but just hold on. So I was like, oh my God, no, please don't separate us. Like, I have a 5-year-old. She's not that big. I'm like, my baby can sit on my lap. I was just doing all type of stuff like that. So luckily, the guy sat down. After like a few minutes, I just see him turn around towards us and give me the thumbs up. I'm like, yes, we're getting on this flight. I mean, we were like all the way in the back, like the last seat on the plane. So we were on the last seat of the plane, and I didn't care. I was just grateful to get on that flight. So that was the first round. We got on the flight. We were going to Minneapolis. Obviously, I was never going to make my connection. Like, by the time we got to Minneapolis, the connection I was supposed to take to Kalispell already left. So as soon as I got off the plane, I asked the gentleman, I'm like, we need to go to Kalispell. Where do we go? So he told us, okay, between C1 and C2, there's a booth. Go over there, and there's a flight leaving at 9 p.m. tonight. Go and ask them if there are seats and try to get on that flight. I'm like, thank you. So I run over to C1. I got on the line. It was a pretty long line. So I got on the line. I went on, and the woman was pretty nice. She was a very nice lady. I'm like, I need to get to Kalispell. And she's like, okay, let me see. I can get you on to Salt Lake City. And then Salt Lake City, you arrive there. You go to Kalispell from Salt Lake City. There's a flight leaving over there at 10 p.m. and it should arrive at 12:04 a.m. to Kalispell. And I'm like, that's great. I'm still going to get there tonight. So either way, that's fine. So she printed the tickets, and I got off the line. Like, I literally walked off the line. And as soon as I walked this way, I get a message. Your flight to Salt Lake has been delayed by like not even like a few minutes. It was delayed by like a good 2 hours. So I knew right away that I was never going to make the connection to Kalispell. So what I did was I got right back online, because at that point I know everybody was frustrated with Delta. Like, I wasn't the only one dealing with flight issues, so I just didn't want to cut. So I got back to the back of the line, and I waited my turn, and I waited. And then while I was waiting, they changed whoever was sitting in front, right? So the ladies must have switched or something, but the person that helped me was no longer there. So by the time I got to the front, it was a different woman sitting at that counter. And I asked her, like, I just got these tickets literally like a few minutes ago, and now the flight is delayed, so I'm never going to make that connection. Is there another option, please? Because I really need to get to where I'm going by tonight. And she's like, how many of you are? And I'm like, I have 3 kids with me, and we've been traveling at this point for like literally a long time with all the standbys and stuff. So I'm like, I have like 3 kids and my husband, so it's 5 of us. And she's like, oh my God, there's nothing. So she was checking, and she's like, literally, there is nothing. So I'm like, oh my God. What about the 9 p.m. flight? Because I noticed the first woman never told me about it. She's like, oh, that flight is totally full. But you know what? Let me call my manager and find out. So she called somebody, and while she was calling, I'm like, I can stand to the side. And she's like, no, I can't multitask right now. But you know, you have to understand, they have been getting it pretty rough at this point. So I'm like, okay. So I just waited, and the person called back, and there was actually 5 seats on that flight. So not, we weren't on standby for the 9 o'clock Kalispell flight. She actually got us tickets onto the flight. So I was like, so overjoyed. I'm like, if you weren't behind this counter, I would literally give you a hug. Like, I would just attack you and hug you. So she's like, oh, you're sweet. And then, you know, I walked off. She got us confirmed seats to 9 p.m. Now, at this time, it was like 2 p.m. in Minnesota. So I'm like, okay. Then I got to my husband and kids, and we went and got something to eat. And then we went and found our gate, because it was still too early to get a gate. When she printed the ticket, I'm like, what gate is it going to be? She's like, I don't know. So I'm like, okay. So around 7 p.m. we went back, and I went back, and she was still there. So I asked her, do we have a gate now? She's like, yeah, you can go to F1. That's where the gate is. And she printed, you know, the seat numbers and everything. And I was lucky I was going to sit with the kids. So I was pretty grateful, and I was like really hopeful at that point. So we walk over to gate F1. So we sat down. Flight is supposed to leave at 9:40 or something like that. 9:53 p.m. So we're sitting. 8 o'clock, the flight is delayed to 10:43. Okay, I was still hopeful, because it was just going to be like a 2-3 hour flight. Fine. All of a sudden, the flight went from 10:43 to 1 a.m. Now departing 1 a.m. And I'm like, uh-oh, something is going on. So the woman, herself, she was shocked. She's like, what's going on? And then she found out that the plane was actually on the tarmac. It was just circulating, and the problem is they didn't have a staff. So they brought out water, snacks, and everything for everybody that was sitting there, like, you know. And at this point, it was getting pretty late. It was like around like almost 10 o'clock, and my kids were tired. So I took out one of my clothes, and I laid it on the floor in the corner, and I just told like 2 of them to go lay down and sleep. And when I did that, like a few minutes later, somebody brought me a mat, like, you know, a little bed. And I put 2 of the kids on it, and the third one too, she went and started sleeping. So now the flight all of a sudden goes from being delayed until 1 a.m. to being delayed until 2:08 a.m. or 2:28, whichever one that was. I'll put it on the screen. So I'm like, at that point, I lost hope. I'm like, whatever, like, you know, let me just go and lay down a little bit, because it's going to be a while. So they brought out mats, they brought out blankets and pillows and everything for all of us, right? We were just sitting there waiting for the flight. Then all of a sudden, like, I think I dozed off for like 30 minutes. And some guy walks by and was like, do you guys know that the flight is delayed, is canceled? And I'm like, no, it's not canceled. I heard that they did move the gates. The gates went from F1 to like F5. So I'm like, just walk over. Everybody moved. I'm pretty sure a lot of people just went and sat to F5. But as soon as he walked away too, I got the message, and my husband got the message and the email that the flight was canceled. So now we have to scramble. It is super late. It's like at this point it was like 11 or midnight. The kids, all 3 of them, were sleeping on mats, you know, with the airport pillows and the airport blankets. So everybody was just sitting there. So at this point, I just walked over, and I'm like, what is my best option? I know we can fly into like nearby cities and try to get to one. There was a 9 a.m. flight, but that flight was totally overbooked, actually. So the best bet was to fly into Washington or Missoula. Those were pretty close, and then you can just drive down. So I went, and of course, everybody was upset. People were like, oh, you were lying to us, and all of this other stuff. It was just not, I didn't get to that point, but I just needed an option out of there. So the guy was like, we would have to separate the tickets at this point. There's no way we can get you all five. So they found one seat on the 10 o'clock flight to Spokane and four seats on the 12 o'clock flight to Spokane. So basically, my husband would go on the first flight, and me and my kids would go on the next flight following that one. We had to book it because that was the last option. Otherwise, you would have been at that airport for like until Friday. They didn't have anything going out until Friday. And obviously, Friday was the end of community camp or my trip. So it didn't make any sense. So I'm like, fine, we will take it. So I took those tickets just because to have an option. Then I went back and then I laid down. I didn't sleep, obviously. Like I dozed off for 30 minutes again, and then I woke up. And I know that the information booths were supposed to open up at 4 in the morning. So around 4:30, I make my way over to one of them, and then I asked the woman that was sitting behind the desk if she can help me. But as soon as she started talking, I knew she wasn't going to help. She wasn't going to do anything. She's like, whatever you have, keep it. If you have a ticket to go wherever you're going, you keep it. They did the best they could. They could, and blah, blah, blah. And she just wasn't even trying. And then she was like, I don't know if, you can get on. And I'm like, can I get on my husband's flight at this point, or can he get on our flight? So his flight apparently only had one seat left. Our flight had like maybe two. So she wasn't trying very hard. She's like, yeah, well, if you want me to look, I can look and tell you the same answer. I'm like, yes, please, can you look? So she looked, she gave me the same answer. And I'm like, okay, thank you, fine. At this point, I was like I already knew she wasn't going to help me. So I walked off, and then like at 9, we walked my husband to his gate. And he was having a hard time because he didn't want to leave me with all 3 kids by myself. So he was like, what about if he takes the kids and go back home? And I'm like, at this point, Delta has all of these things going on, so they probably not, you're going to end up in the airport sleeping because they don't even know where their crews are, which was what was ultimately the problem. They had no idea where their crew was. So we walk him to his gate. He sat down, and I'm like, give me the tickets. At this point, I have nothing to lose. Let me go and shoot my shot and see what they're going to say. As soon as I walk, between the C1 and C2, because his gate was actually C1. So I walked over and I got in line, and as soon as I walk up to the lady, I'm like, hi, can you please help me? And then I handed her my tickets. As soon as she saw the ticket, she's like, I've been looking for you. And I'm like, what? Did you help me yesterday? She's like, no. And I'm like, were you on my flight? She's like, no, you were supposed to be on my flight to Kalispell. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The flight was canceled, right? So she's like, no, you were supposed to be on the daytime flight, my daytime flight to Kalispell. And I'm like, oh, I could never make that one because my flight from New York was canceled in the first place. So she was like, my manager has the same first name and the same last name as you do. And I even called her yesterday when I saw the ticket with the name. I called her and I'm like, Fatu, where are you? And she's like, what are you talking about? I am not flying. I'm not going anywhere. What are the odds, guys? What are the odds of just that happening? My name is not common in America. So especially like Minnesota, Minneapolis, I don't know. But she remembered my name just because of that little coincidence. And she's like, I'm going to get you out of here. So she's like looking at, and I'm like, then there's a flight leaving for 9 a.m. Can I get on that flight? She's like, let me see. Let me clean up this flight. So she started finding seats based on who didn't make the connections, right? She's like, this person is never going to make it. This person is never going to make it because they didn't even get on the first flight. This person didn't show up. Anyway, the point is she found 5 seats on that plane, 5 tickets. But guess what? Delta overbooked that plane by 7 seats. So I was unlucky. Womp womp. So yeah, she was like, there's no way I can get you on that flight. Your best bet is to go to Spokane. So at this point, and I explained to her, my husband is separated from us. Can you get us on his flight? without me losing my seats. She's like, I can try to put you on standby for his flight, and I will still keep those tickets just in case. So that's what she did. She was like, I was standing there waiting for her to just put us on standby because his flight was leaving earlier than ours. So if we didn't get on his flight, I would just go on my merry way with, the later flight. Next thing I know, this woman is printing tickets, and she was like, I got you seats. She got me seats on my husband's flight, so we all left together and we ended up not separating. You would think that would be the end of it. No, we get to Spokane, we rent a car, and it's a 4.5-hour drive from Spokane to Kalispell. So as we started driving, I'm telling you guys, listen, these roads are they're like this, going down. So imagine just constantly on a roller coaster, when you reach the top and then it starts to drop. That's how I felt for 2 hours straight. I was full-blown panic mode. I literally had to pull over, and I cried a little bit. I'm like, I can't do this. And at this point, we had like 2.5 hours to go, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? Am I just crazy? And I'm like, I have to keep going, because what am I gonna do? I'm gonna be stuck on this mountain, right? Like, nobody's gonna save me. Everybody's going 70 miles per hour downhill. I haven't seen any cops. If I get stuck here, what's gonna happen? So I just braved it, and then we kept going, and we made it finally that day. The next day, Wednesday, at like 6 p.m. Kalispell time, after 6, which is pretty much like 8 p.m. New York. So it took us like almost 48 hours to get to our destination. At this point, I was tired, I was stressed. I missed the whole first day of camp, but I made it. And there was just a few lessons that I wanted to talk about this whole journey. Number 1, who is behind the counter or who you're speaking to matters. You're going to get no from one person, and the next person is going to say yes. So you have to be persistent, and you have to persevere. You cannot take no for an answer. That's just one of the biggest lessons and takeaways that I got. And also just the grit of it, like not giving up. I mean, I could have given up in New York. I could have given up in Minneapolis. I mean, there was a lot of times I could have just stopped and went back, and I would have missed out on this amazing opportunity. Even if I missed the first day, the next 2 days were pretty nice. Who you're talking to actually matters. And if you get a no from one person, go back and try from a different person. That is one takeaway that I got. Another takeaway is just, you will get obstacles. Things are going to get thrown up, your way, and how you handle it matters. At no point did I get overly upset, I was very emotional in the sense that I just wanted to cry, but I never was insulting the workers or anything like that. That's not my personality. So I was just pretty okay, I know right now things are not in their control, they're not in mine, so we just gonna have to keep asking until we get a yes from somebody. So that's what I pretty much did, and voila, here I am in beautiful Kalispell telling you this story. And I hope you take away, don't give up on your goals. There's this saying by John Assaraf, are you committed? No, are you interested or are you committed to your goals? And sitting back and reflecting, I was very, very committed to getting here, no matter what it took. And that's exactly what I did. But anyway, that was the crazy nightmarish story. And at that point, I think Delta was they were the only airline with all of this trouble from the whole Microsoft thing, right? Everybody else was doing pretty okay. Alaska Airline, United, they were flying without any problems. But everybody who booked Delta, somehow we just ended up in this type of situation, which is breathe through it, right? But yeah, that is pretty much my trip. It wasn't a complete nightmare. There were some times that I cried a little bit, but it is what it is. But yeah, so anyways, I am going to end the video here, and then I will do another video with all the amazing things that happened at camp. And that's that. Bye guys.